Now you are the featured image that seems to be showing up on everybody's computer. Oh, it's not true?
No.
Okay, good. No. I guess just on mine. So there you are. You're a star. We're going to start in just a second. Jonathan is setting up the last few bits.
You are officially live on YouTube. So
okay. So
here we go, Dr. Williams.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Okay, so this meeting is being recorded. For what good that does any of us, I don't know, but welcome everyone. Thanks for checking in. I'm glad to see you all here. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing the screen because the presentation I put together is PowerPoint centric in the hopes that slides and such will navigate well. We'll see how all this works. So bear with me while I do it. Don't. And that's that. And one last bit. Okay. There's my screen. I've been told sometimes that this obscures views. So, welcome. My adventures in mediated music. Now, mediated music might be thought of as a much broader term about anything that sort of either comes between the musician and the audience or between the ways in which we produce sound, etc. But for me, what I'm talking about is the integration of visual and music, particularly in terms of what just casually we can refer to as videos. What does that mean? And when I was prompted to put this one together, obviously in response to what we've done with the Pink Floyd and the King Crimson ensembles, and I thought it might be interesting partly to give you a little bit of like behind the scenes how that stuff is actually worked on and created, but also what led me to that point last semester to set something like that up. And so you ready? Here we go. I have a band, Birdsong at Morning, and we put out several recordings, 15 years ago. When we decided to put out another CD my Lord, some time ago, 2015, I think, it was determined that maybe we would need to make music videos to promote the recording, etc. So I ended up making my first music video, and it was a little bit terrifying because I really don't know what that's about, other than that I'm a massive film buff, and so I studied a lot of films and how they're put together, etc. But I never actually really done it. So we hired a very, very good cinematographer to get the images. I always felt like with this stuff, if you can capture a decent image, then you're way ahead of the game. And then it's more about a sense of how do we construct image to fit the sound. So I'm just going to show you a little clip of this first music video, like a minute of it or whatever, and then we'll move on. But here was my first version of how to make a music video, right?
No sound. No music.
I've been told there's no music. That's frustrating. Hold on. It says it's up, and I did optimize for sound, so I'm going to stop sharing just on the off chance that I can actually fix this, because it would be nice to be able to hear the music. Not that it's ultra essential, but let's just make sure that is. Yeah, it is. So, I'm going to try again. We shall see if this works at all. And back to my screen share. Maybe this is the problem. I wasn't hosting. Now I'm hosting. Take 2 with music.
It could be there's so many worlds left to discover. There's so many wonders in the dark. There's so many ways to be my lover, never to part.
Okay, so that's a quick little clip, and more happens in the video than just me and some machines, but not a lot more happens. And we started small scale, one little environment, shot it in one night, or maybe I think actually two nights to get some of these close-ups of gears, but essentially didn't really have a script, and the cinematographer kind of directed, this would be a good place, this lighting looks good, and I said, okay, I need close-ups of me singing this verse. We put the video together. I was happy that it worked, kind of. And I realized that in the editing, you could change the way people perceived the music. So that kind of clued me in a little bit about how a certain edit might throw the rhythm of the piece off or might direct your ear towards what your eye is seeing. That's the power of these images. Anyway, okay, so that worked, and decided, okay, if that worked, then maybe time to make more videos. So we ended up making a couple more videos for this album, and as I got further along, I got a little more ambitious. So this next video is a narrative video. I decided maybe there was about a song that kind of hinted at a narrative storyline in the song lyric itself. So let's construct a video that tells a story as well. So I'm dropping in the middle of the video. You haven't seen what the setup is nor what the outcome is, but it involved using actors who were not in the band and also other musicians. And locations. So this was a very complicated video for me to shoot, and it probably took years off my life. I'll show you a little clip of it, then tell you a couple of quick stories, and then move on. But this is the notion about how image tells story. And again, partly by thinking about edits. Some of these edits were pre-planned. I know how I want to cut from one scene to the other, but many of the others were discovered in the editing process.
7 hours we reached the borderland. 7 hours and nothing more to say. So hear the sound of the future rushing by. Hear the sound and let the music play. Close your eyes, I will soon be free. Side by side, my refugee. I'm the ride for destiny, like the river runs to the sea. Close your eyes, I will soon be free. Side by side, my refugee. I'm the ride for destiny, like the river runs to the sea.
Okay, so a couple of things about this, and by the way, I'm just going to quickly see if anybody needs good. This video was very complicated, and actually, I'm going to not quite go here yet. Let me look at this for a second. All those locations, etc., the timing of it. My hair looks like the wind is really blowing it hard, but it's because it was a very humid day and it froze in that position. It was the very last set of images we shot because I had all these other actors and locations to get through. So the last thing we shoot with little time left is the actual band performance. So one of the things I learned was that Darlene has lots of stories. So it was a challenging shoot. My vanity got the better of me, and I was like, I can't use all these shots of me with this goofy hair. Maybe I can zoom in. Maybe I can pretend. That's what I see every time I see the video, is my goofy hair. But part of the reason that I'm talking about this is that in constructing the narrative with other actors and telling this story, I was worried that we would lose interest in the musicians who actually were making the sounds that you were hearing. And so I wanted to make sure that we had lots of shots of us also performing. Then it became a question of, well, what do you want to see in musicians performing? Do you want to see what their fingers are doing on instruments? Do you want to see the faces of the people making the sound? Do you want to see interactions between musicians? Who's particularly important at any given moment in the music? Who's maybe been left out for a while and needs a close-up just to keep balance? These were all really big questions for me as I figured out the editing of the piece. And I'm not sure in the final product it really works, but it reminded me of things I wasn't really thinking about when we shot. But that when I started editing together, I realized, wow, this seems very X, Y, or Z centric. I need to rethink the edit to try to make it a little more equitable. And also to make sure that when someone's taking an amazing guitar solo, we're not looking at somebody's foot on the ground, just keeping time. So what is the important thing that needs to be conveyed? All right. 3 videos for that album. The next album, Signs and Wonders, we made a music video for every song. So that was a project where the album music recording and the video production were of equal importance. And I mean, budgetarily, I probably spent more money on the video side of it than I did making the music side of it. There was a gathering of SRT alum about 10 years ago, and I was asked to give a little presentation. I think just they were being polite. And my presentation was, music and image are inextricably wed. Get used to it. You will never get to the luxury of just making recordings anymore. We're going to have to think about how visuals interact. Now, I may have been overstating the case, but I drank my own Kool-Aid and started really making videos a part of not just a way to promote the record, but this album in particular. I decided to make the videos for every song while I was still writing the songs. And so a lot of the songs were written with the notion that there would be a visual element to balance that out. The clip I'm going to show you now is a long clip. I'm going to talk over it because who wants to actually just watch 4 or 5 minutes of this thing? But this is about, again, there's no narrative, no characters, no location per se. So the question was, how do we create a sense of drama visually to sort of match the very, very, very slow build up that's in the recording itself? This is a cover of a song by Supertramp. And this also taught me another lesson in post, which is that even if you secure the mechanical rights and a video right to sync the image to the music, that doesn't necessarily mean you can stream it. So this video is available for YouTube watchers in Europe and Asia, but not in North America. We got a big takedown notice. It was very unpleasant because I had paid for a license, and not just the mechanical for the album, but for a video sync license. Anyway, yeah. So, but I am going to show this clip to you because it's all about the musicians. And I'm going to talk over to sort of explain what's going on in the video and what was going on conceptually in the process. So here we go.
But at night, when all the world is
So what you haven't seen leading up to this moment is me solo, and then slowly adding the 2 other players that we see here, all through the first verse. Now there's more sound. Maybe you're noticing, well, actually, let me turn it up for just a second.
Won't you please?
You may notice the presence of orchestral strings in the background, and that's who's actually in the visual foreground.
I know it's
All of those shadows in front of us were the string players.
please tell me who I am. Who I am.
You may notice this long pullback tracking shot here. This was not by happenstance. When I made this video, I storyboarded it as if it were a narrative. every millisecond of the recording, I had figured out what I wanted to shoot, how the camera was supposed to move, close-ups, medium shots, distances, etc. So this is something that's completely constructed as a video. It was filmed out of sequence, and then I cut it together following my script. What that meant was it was really challenging to film because we would only need 3, 4, 5 seconds of a shot. Maybe get a couple of takes of it, then do a different setup with lights, positioning of musicians, etc. And then shoot for that and do it again and do it again and do it again. It felt very disjointed and seemed to have nothing to do with the musical performance. It was really hard for everybody that you're seeing to feel like they were in the performance of it. That starts to change when we move into some of the longer shots that are about to come up, where I think the musicians had a better sense of, okay, I'm able to play to the track a little more convincingly. Also, string players, I want you all to see all the people you're hearing. So I'll play this up a little bit just while you're hearing this. So every time you see a cut, this is pretty much how my script intended. I might have changed my mind about whether it was on beat 2 or beat 3 that I made the cut, but every one of these shots was designed to be pretty much what you're seeing. Again, I didn't design the lighting. I think the lighting is gorgeous. I'm very happy with, again, the cinematographer, same person who's been working on all the Birdsong videos. And as the arrangement builds, so too do the number of players that you see. I hope that maybe watching people make these sounds would help explain what you were hearing. Okay, and you've probably seen familiar faces. You also may or may not recognize the location, because that's the concert hall. It's amazing what you can do when you dim all the lights. So you don't really know the particular space this was filmed in, but that's where it was filmed. All of that filmed on the stage of the concert hall. So I really got into the notion of, okay, editing can truly show what is happening in the sound that we're hearing. But you also have to assume that the audience wants to see that. So in this case, it was necessarily, you didn't really see so much the musician interacting as much as you saw the musician making sound. And I'm happy with this video. It was, a lot of work, so I have to be happy with it. But if I had to do it again, I would rethink what I was trying to show much more of the interaction between musicians. This is something that I discovered after I made the edit, was that it was very clinically precise and, warm and rich and evocative, but maybe slightly distanced. And it would be nicer to see people interacting. However, there was another track on the album that was designed to be the opposite of this, even though it's still also about musicians. This is a short little instrumental piece from the album, and I'll just let you watch it. You can compare what you see the musicians doing and if you see the musicians looking at each other. Now in this video, we had the same cinematographer, one camera. We sat around in this group and we lip sync mimed to the recording. I think there were 4 takes. And each take, the cinematographer just handheld the camera, walked around and shot what he thought was looking interesting at any given time. There was no script. There was no direction, no make sure you get so-and-so at a certain point in it. So maybe sometimes the video isn't showing the most important piece of music you're hearing at that time, or maybe we luck into it. But what this video does do is just show musicians making music and making music together. As I say, I think there were 4 takes. We were planning to shoot this in a slightly different location, and that didn't work, so we immediately scrambled, which also meant that we didn't have a whole lot of time to shoot or to plan. And it felt, again, rushed in the shooting, and I had no idea what we had captured. It was only in the edit that I could put it together. Comparing this to the Logical Song prior video you saw, the Logical Song edit took me about a day and a half, even though it was 7 minutes long with lots of cuts, because it was simply follow the script, grab the best version of each shot, drop it in place, off you go. Kahana Shuffle is 1.5 minutes long, and it took me days and days and days to make this edit, because when you look at all the shots, there's no particular sense of what is important. Well, it could be this one, could be that one, could be this one or that one. They're all okay. Actually, that's not good. Maybe this one's better. And I re-edited and re-edited and re-edited, partly, again, to make sure I was trying to show everybody that was participating. If there was something musically that I thought was significant, seeing if I had a shot that would highlight that. I didn't always, because it's happenstance. There was no script. Every once in a while, I was like, well, like for example, Darlene's playing a nice little solo line, and in all 4 takes, the camera was never on her at that moment. So there you go. You don't get to see that. I've tried to find some other place where I can show that. Sometimes I show faces in lieu of what they may be playing on their instrument. I dreaded, this was the last video I edited for the whole project, because I recognized that without any script and any sense of the shape of it, it was going to be very difficult to figure out what I wanted to show. And that brings me to the next round of things, which is when the pandemic struck, I was at a loss as to what to do for a number of things, making musical sound being one of them. If you all might have even remembered when I was chair, for a little bit of time, the aviary was actually my office on the first floor. That's actually where I mixed Signs and Wonders album, where I edited half the videos for that project. That's where my workspace was. When I was no longer chair, I didn't have an office big enough. I started renting a room in somebody's house in Carlisle, Mass. And the notion was they'll all be away at work during the day, and I can go and make sound, practice, make new records or whatever, and not bother anybody. And that worked great all through the fall of 2019 and into the winter, into 2020. And then when the pandemic hit, I could no longer go to their house because they were not going to work. They were in the house, and we were trying not to have any interaction at all, bringing strangers back into, et cetera. So I suddenly had no workspace, no teaching space, no office to teach in, no place to make musical sound, and certainly no place to do anything beyond that. During the pandemic, all of my yoga classes, and by the way, I'm a yoga teacher, they were all canceled. Like, what do we do? What do you do? So I informally started teaching friends via first Facebook, then Zoom, how, just doing yoga classes in our little apartment where you see me now. And it kind of resonated. It was like, well, this works. I figured out how I can teach yoga this way, and obviously learning to teach classes. For anybody who had me for spring a year ago, you might recognize the couch and the brick, because this was where I taught. But I thought, I need a place, I need a space. And as I thought about that, I also thought, maybe I need something that's bigger than just a control room or an office space. But rather, if you're going to rent a space, what if you could rent a space where maybe I could teach a yoga class? Because, the pandemic won't be here forever. I might need a large enough space where I could teach a class of 20 people. I might need a large enough space where I could rehearse with the band. And as I started thinking about that, I thought, okay, you do need a large space. but the pandemic is still going on and you're not going to be able to play for audiences. So what if you design this as not just a recording space or a rehearsal space, but also to some degree as a television studio? So the photos you're looking at here, the one on the left is an image of the space pretty much as I moved into it. The piano wasn't mine and that got moved out. But there's a pile of gear just thrown around. The image on the right, the space is getting a little more organized, and this lay of crap you see in the front image there, these long T-shaped images, those are all the basis for what would become my COVID screens. And so when I took the aviary took the lease the middle of July. First it was about moving the gear in, and then next it was about building screens, because I knew if I was going to have musicians playing together, I was going to have to be able to safely isolate them. And that's what that was about. Let me show you another set of images from the aviary just to give you, welcome to the world of COVID screens. They're 8 feet high, covered in plastic, and they were designed to allow us to have musicians sort of inhabit their own spaces, especially to be able to sing. So this is basically what it was designed to do, maybe as a rehearsal, maybe more than that. And again, I thought about television or some sort of broadcasting from the start, webcasting. I'd seen a lot of musicians at the beginning of the pandemic doing their, single laptop camera, looking at them sit on the couch and play their little song. And that to some degree was somewhat charming. But it kind of got old fast because everybody was doing it, and also because not every form of music lends itself to the guitar on the couch. Unfortunately for me, I was in the middle of trying to release an album that was much more loud, rocked out, and electric than the birdsong stuff, which might work well on the couch. So I was trying to figure out, how can I present this newer, louder music? I don't want to do it on my couch. I want to do it with a band. So the first idea was to do a live stream with the band in the aviary. One of the things that I realized from back in the day of making the recordings and earlier videos was that having a mobile camera, a camera that's not tied with cables, etc., will allow for a much greater interaction and give you images that translate the music better. So I ended up getting a system that we could use remote cameras with no cables, because as soon as you attach the cable, you can't really go so many places. And there's all sorts of technical issues involved in this. But let me show you what we were facing in the first webcast. So here is setting up for the first webcast that we did the very end of August of last year, just before the start of the fall semester. You're just going to very quickly, it's just a quick little thing that Darlene grabbed with the phone. You'll see a couple of musicians that are playing, and I've listed their names: Eric Garibaldi, Shane Alexander, and Matt Swanton. Some of you may remember some of these folks. You'll also very briefly see the core of the crew that was available. Grace Reeder doing our audio, Corbin, whom you know, Corbin Lewis, who handled the video switching and also just sort of helping me to set up the space itself, and Jeremy Moyson, who did the lighting and also set up a lot of the gear and sort of worked with me on how we would best make this thing work. So here's just a quick little moment of us getting ready to do something. Okay, so whoops, that was Grace walking into frame. I'll show it again. Maybe I'll do it from here. Nope, it doesn't work that way. All right, I won't do it from there. Oh, come on, people. Here comes Grace. There she goes. Other musicians getting ready. Corbin and I setting up more COVID screens. And then this is Jeremy here on the right, running some cables and setting up lights. Now, they were asked to help me to figure out how to do a live webcast. And they've become intrinsic to several other things since then. But here is an excerpt of what we actually streamed live on that day in August. And you'll recognize that it's got problems. Right. What are many of the problems? Well, one of them obviously is the sound, and the main problem we had with the sound was that the drums and to some degree the guitars were so loud that they leaked into everything that had a microphone near it. The drum mix that Grace was capturing, if you just listen to the drums, sounded great. It sounded really very professional. But as soon as we opened up the vocal mics, it sounded like a big set of drums playing in a room, bouncing around and having no focus. And, and to some degree fighting with whatever was in front of those microphones. So this was a big problem for me. The other thing that may be evident when you're watching is that sometimes long stretches of the time, you're watching images that don't seem related to what you're hearing. And this is because there's no script yet again. We have 3 camera operators, actually 2 camera operators and a fixed camera. The fixed camera is in the booth with me. It's not a very flattering shot, but at least it was one that we could always count on cutting to if you had to. 2 other people walking around with these little remote cameras. But Corbin was tasked with trying to select which image to show, suffering from a 1.5-second delay and not knowing who was making what sound where because he can't see what's happening in this room. So it's a lot of guesswork. And the camera operators might be, oh, I've got the wrong guitar player for the solo. I'll eventually get there. But in the interim, what are we going to show? One of the benefits of the software program that I was using to do the webcast is that it did capture all of the audio and the video. Now, I couldn't do a lot with the audio because the drum leakage into the vocal mics was just there. But I could re-edit the cameras. Now, I couldn't create images that weren't there, but I could change the way they were cut together. So if you go on our website now, if you go on YouTube and see this, this song is available for viewing in a slightly altered form. Let me show you. This is the newer edit that I could do after the fact where I could choose a little bit better where I would cut. I still don't have footage of the right guitar player, but eventually we do. There he is. Hopefully this edit at least showed the band interacting rather than wondering where is the guitar player. Okay, so it was really fun to do this. It was very exciting to go live to the world. But when I looked back at the footage, it was so defeating because it wasn't nearly matching the production level that I was hoping for. And it cost me a lot of money to get this thing set up. So what to do? Why is this not quite working? Well, one of the things was, okay, I need to buy some dividers to help isolate the drums a little bit better. So I ended up buying some of those plexiglass panels, and plexiglass was at a premium, probably still is. And that doesn't eliminate the drum leakage. It does reduce it a bit, but it doesn't really do it enough to feel like we're getting the quality that I'm hoping to get, and that in fact is being got as long as you don't have vocal mics up. I'm going to show you another performance. This is something that over time, as we continue to do these webcasts, we got a little bit better at thinking about how we would isolate some of the sounds. And one of the things to do is to say, okay, maybe no drum kits, or maybe not the level of volume that rock stuff was really doing. If we dial down the level of volume a lot, we might be able to get away with it. And I'm going to show you this performance because it's challenging. There are 2 percussionists, bass is amplified, and there's a string quartet, all in the same room, all at the same time. The audio mix here is not, again, stellar, but it is maybe listenable. The other thing about this performance is that we were going to do a webcast with these same set of musicians, but I was also asked to be part of a Jeff Buckley tribute. And when they asked us to do it, they were soliciting input from a bunch of different performers around the world, and we were supposed to supply a video 2 weeks in advance of the performance itself. So it wasn't going to actually be live. And this was a new idea for me. Wait a minute, you could do a webcast that wasn't actually live? Huh. Well, that would mean I could go back and make a quicker, tighter edit. Some of the things that I've been able to do after the fact of our webcast, I could do before I sent them the footage. So we did this version of Grace, and you'll recognize some of the musicians again, and a little bit better audio mix, but certainly more of a sense of there will be editing control over the shoot. I'm still at the mercy of the camera operators, but the camera operators are getting better at predicting where a shot might need to be, what's going to be of focus. And in this case, since we weren't live, I think we did 2 takes of this. And so on the first pass, they sort of learned what was happening in the arrangement. And then in the second pass, they could be in place for the cameras. So think about the challenges of where you place the camera, and then think about the benefits of editing in this regard. So here's just a little bit of this Grace performance. Okay, now we did this Grace performance 2 weeks before we tracked the Pink Floyd ensemble. And the Grace performance actually went live to the world while we were recording the Pink Floyd ensemble. I had to actually take a break in the middle of tracking and go talk to the folks and wave and say, yeah, hey, here we are. Jeff Buckley's mother was there. It was very nice. And she said, what's going on? I said, yeah, sorry about all the noise. We're doing a Pink Floyd thing. And she said, Pink Floyd rocks. So Jeff Buckley's mother anointed the Pink Floyd project before we began. But this is the aviary. You can see it in this shot that's frozen here. The notion of the COVID screens, the size of the room with the black curtains to give it a little bit of a sort of indefined space. Where is this happening? And the Grace performance and my ability to edit and quickly mix it to some degree was how I thought about structuring the Pink Floyd ensemble. The lessons learned from all of this webcasting was that drums leak into vocal mics. If at all possible, try not to record vocals while you're recording drums. That would help sonically. The other dictate, as you all are aware, is that during the pandemic, we were trying to restrict the numbers of people that were sharing a space at any given time. And so all through the semester while we were planning Pink Floyd, I knew that we weren't going to be able to all get together and play in one room at the same time, but I wanted to do a project that at least created the illusion that we had done this, and that, following the guidelines, we could do 6, maybe 7 musicians plus the crew in the space. And that meant really thinking about the record, breaking down the record into its component parts, but also thinking about what instruments are going to be necessary for the first round of tracking, which ones could be done as overdubs. And that's partly a question of, can we get through the song without this information? And also, what's going to lend itself to a better audio quality? So I quickly thought, okay, right, so no vocals and drums. That's easy. We just won't do it. And then I thought, well, wait a minute, there's some pieces where I feel like it's really important that the vocals lead the ensemble. So it presented a lot of challenges. But we did structure the whole tracking notion with layers of recordings. And to be fair, that's exactly how Pink Floyd creates the album. Multi-track technology, as most of all of us know, is done in layers over time. And so I didn't feel like it was cheating. I sort of felt like we were honoring how the album was made by making a video performance of the album in a similar fashion. So that was what we set out to do. I'm going to show a little clip, which I think many of you all have seen, and some of you are in. Just a little moment of this just to sort of get it back in our heads. And then I want to talk a little bit more and show you some background versions of this stuff. So here's a little bit of that video. Okay, so one of the things that we discovered in the process of these webcasts, and especially the Grace video, was that those plexi screens around the drums, depending on which angle they were facing, would create interesting reflections, and you could see other people in the room reflected in the panels. Likewise, the plastic COVID screens sometimes showed reflections, usually fainter, and with the light hitting it just right, they almost seem to disappear entirely, especially in a higher contrast lighting situation that we could do in post. So we were using the plastic plexiglass to our advantage to help bring people into frame who were on the opposite side of the room. So many of these shots include more than one musician that you're seeing. Even if the focus is the camera's pointed at one player, we may see 2 or 3 people in reflection. And those reflections, as we see in this still image here, also gave me the idea that maybe I would overlap even multiple camera angles to create a richness of more people playing together than were actually present at the same time. And I'm going to show you a clip now, the same thing you just saw, but here is the same clip, but these are all the camera angles. And I'll be honest, the frame, the slide says it's all the camera angles. I realized after this I was moving way too quickly. I left out 3. So we're missing 3 cameras in what you're about to see. But this is what I look at when I begin the editing process. And see if you spot the shots that end up get selected, and think about what's happening in all these various iterations. Okay, so that's a quick hint at what the cameras capture and then how it gets a little bit assembled. I'm going to show you another clip just to remind ourselves of this event, which is that there was one song on the whole album that we did 95% live. The slide guitarists were overdubbed at the beginning. The rest of it is a live performance by the other musicians. And it's one of those that crosses the line because the drums and the vocals are present at the same time and it's loud. So this is a highlight of the performance and one of the biggest challenges in terms of mix for me, because the drums and Cam's vocal are fighting a battle, which she wins. But it required, when we were beginning the tracking, that Grace had to replace. We tried 3 different microphones on Cam, not because she was sounding bad, but because the drums were not interacting well. And so we found something that rejected the drums as much as possible. So part of the beauty of this particular moment is that this is as close to a live band performance as we could get. So the two, having Leo and Jesse play slide, this is the overdub. But watching Matt and Brad play, that's part of the live track from the vocals as well as the drums. And this framing just happened to allow it to look like these 3 players were maybe in the same place at the same time, even though it's clearly a bit of a fade, an overdub. I also shot the slide knowing that I was going to want to make a cut, so the camera begins to lift. Okay, sorry, Cam. This is great, but one of the things that's nice is seeing Brad's reflection in the plastic screen so that you see a sense of the band, even if you're mostly focusing on the vocal. There is a sense that there are other players here. And as this pans, you'll also, I think, see Keenan reflected at one point. You can sometimes see Matt reflected. We had this sense that there was a band capturing something in real time here. Yeah, there's Keenan in the background. You'll also note there's no edit. This is one long continual shot. And in fact, I was able to keep this from the moment we jump to Cam in close-up, the camera pans to Caitlin and then pans over to Mia as one uninterrupted shot. I'm not going to show the whole thing, but just I wanted it to change the editing dynamic of switching from player to player to player to player to something that really conveyed the sense that something had happened in real time all at once. And I'm very proud of that I knew to do that with the camera, but obviously most proud that when you point a camera at a musician, that everybody could deliver at such a high level. So we knew we got something when we got that performance. And I think that it was one of those technological challenges where maybe the mix isn't as ideal as I would like it to be, but I would sacrifice the mix for the fact that we got that live performance and that the cameras were there to capture it. This is, again, the importance of having the visual to reinforce what's happening musically. You can close your eyes and listen to this, and it's pretty good. It's really good. But when you see it, I think it's just completely captivating, as is the entire album production for me, saying that as the person who made the edit. We also did the King Crimson Ensemble, and one of the things I wanted to change about the Crimson Ensemble versus Pink Floyd is I wanted to give it a different visual character. So we made reference to the album cover for Red, the album that we did, which was in a high contrast black and white. We shot in color, just like we had shot with Floyd. In Floyd, I did color correction to sort of create a sense of a similar color palette wherever possible. In Crimson, it was all done in post to create the high contrast black and white. I'll show you a little bit of that footage just to sort of get that in your ears and eyes. Okay, so we get to see the same set of musicians interacting, but these cuts are a little more specially focused on what everyone's going to do. There's a lot less happenstance into how the cameras capture the performance because, in large part, this is an ensemble that had actually been able to play together before the pandemic. The reason that I brought them in to do another version of it is that we were just about to give our concert when everything shut down last spring. So we all knew each other and knew how the performance went. So it was much easier for me to say, Jude, one of our camera operators, make sure you go over there and get what's happening with Jesse on the drums at this moment. I'm going to make sure that I get so-and-so at this moment. And I could somewhat direct what the cameras are going to capture. The moment I'm most proud of about the King Crimson version, though, is what we did with Providence. And on the album from King Crimson, Providence is essentially a slightly modified version of a live performance they gave of basically a free improvisation. And so the question was, how do we cover a free improvisation? We'd grappled with that question in rehearsal. So we had already kind of experimented with how we might collectively do a free improv, and there was a sense of a shape and a form, a few little cue points, particularly in what Jesse's doing on drums. Okay, when Jesse does this, that signals X, Y, or Z. When he does the big choke cymbal thing, that's the end, okay? Now, other than that, we have no rules. And in rehearsal, most of the performances were really, really good and always different. When we did this tracking, I was confronted with the same problem of, okay, I can't get the whole ensemble in the same room at the same time. We're going to have to do the free improv in layers the same way we have been doing all the other assemblages. And that presented a big challenge because how does a musician interact if they can't be present with one another? What I realized was that the shape of the improv that we had worked on started smaller with a handful of musicians, and the gradually players came in. And the players that came in tended to be electric guitars, drums, bass. So what we ended up with was tracking in reverse order. I had all the electric guitarists except for Megan, whom you see pictured here, along with bass and drums, play a free improv. A kind of a noise thing, and with Jesse remembering, do a couple of things in the drums that are kind of reminiscent of what we used to do and do the big chokes so we know that we're over with. So we did that. And then the next session, we brought in the other players, or most of the other players. So we brought in both Megan's, the flute and guitar, Pat on sax, and I think Connor was playing keyboard on that. And that was the thing that would start the free improv. But of course, how do you start the free improv if they're tracking second? Well, I told Grace, our audio person, to roll back the tape, as it were, the computer program, and say, give us 2 minutes 2 minutes in front of all the noise improv that we did. And we'll start in a small scale. And as they're playing, the sound of the original guitar and drum stuff will come into their headphones, and while the guitarist and drummer can't respond to what's happening in this overdub, the people doing the overdub can respond to what they're hearing. So I'm going to show you a little bit of that. And then for me, the big marvel is that 2 of the members of the ensemble weren't able to be at the tracking at all and had to come in and do their own solo overdubs. So we have 4 iterations of musicians playing a free improvisation together, not at the same time, however. And so here is essentially the second overdub, but it's the first thing you hear. And we get to see the interaction between the 2 Megans, which is a big part of how this thing is set up structurally. And with Connor in the background, you see him and realize those small little jingly things are happening. Somebody's responsible for that, and you see who's doing that. Now, slowly you're going to start to hear some of the amp noise start to creep in a little bit, and we just bring that in. This is not something that I faded up in the mix. This is something that's how the band played. And then the initial, or excuse me, the overdub, the folks you're watching right now. Okay, here's Matt as an overdub. Just listening to what he's hearing and playing a minimal amount of keyboard work wherever he felt there was room for it, just as if he were in the room with them all at the same time. And we'll start to see visually that we hear some guitar amps, and we see some of the other guitar players begin to add into what they are doing. They're not doing much, but they're present. This is the first time we've seen them. It's also the first time we hear them. What's remarkable to me about the student performance here is that everyone played with such attention to listening that they knew to leave holes for people to fill or not, but they also knew how to respond to what they were hearing. So the two Megans have no idea that Matt has just played this really cool piano note. They don't necessarily know that, but they do hear Andrew beginning to come in with that electric guitar. And so they're starting to realize, okay, the noise is coming. It's coming slowly, but it's coming. We might up our intensity, which is what you hear them doing here. And we've heard cymbals, but we haven't seen them. So eventually I need to cut to show the audience, okay, the whole band is now present. So therefore you'll cut to Jesse doing a cymbal roll. Even though we've heard them before, this just reminds you, yes, you did hear a cymbal. There is a drummer. This will all become a big band version of this. And there it is. Now, Rob, that's the first note that he played. He waited all this time. I played him the playback from the beginning. He waited 4.5 minutes and played one note. And then he did a pickup into the drums as if he knew the drums were coming in. It's astounding to me that he does this. Think about when Rob starts to play a busier line, and then Jesse comes right in after him. Okay, that just is phenomenal to me that happened. And so it was set up as a construction to hope that it would happen, and it did happen. So for me, Providence is actually the best thing in the whole thing. And I know that's like, when I listen to the album, that's the song I'm tempted to skip. But in our video performance, it's the thing I'm most intrigued with watching, because you see the interplay of the musicians, and it's evidence to me of their ability to truly focus and listen. So I feel like in some ways the visual is communicating the act of listening as much as it is the act of making musical sound. Okay, so this is where we're leading up to, and that's that last weekend we gathered the Pink Floyd Ensemble again, and we've begun our project for tracking Wish You Were Here, the follow-up album to Dark Side of the Moon, it turns out. So what I'm about to show you is very raw. It's a very, very quick, rough mix, which is I usually begin by mixing the album quickly and then cutting the video and then remixing the album and reinserting the audio to match the visual. This is basically an indication to you all of how good the student players are and how much of a headache putting one of these things together will be. So just as with the version of Breathe, where I showed all the multiple cameras, this is showing you the various camera footages that we have from the shoot. Essentially, there are 3 camera operators capturing each layer of overdub. So for each take, we have a number of players set aside to do a particular thing, and then I have to edit it. One of the trademarks of this particular album is that the centerpiece song, Shine On You Crazy Diamond, is divided in half on the album. They call it parts 1 through 5 and parts 6 through 9. And I insisted that even though there were all these parts and all these different sections, that we track it that way. So we tracked parts 6 through 9 as one long take. about 13 and a half minutes. It means that many times there's a guitar player who plays in the first 30 seconds and then doesn't play for 6 more minutes, sits back and lets everything happen, jumps in, does their bit, jumps back out, which means it's really challenging for me to make the mix. But it also means that there is that sense that it's still performance. It's still what I've learned from the Providence Free Improv was people can leave space. And when they come in, as long as they're listening to the track and listening to each other while they do it, we still get a group collective performance. So this is just a short little bit, like a minute of in the middle of this long piece. And you'll see the rhythm section musicians and another layer of instrumental overdubs are present the whole time. The vocal overdub layer, that really doesn't make sense because there's only vocals in this song, only vocals right in the middle for about 45 seconds. So I didn't really feel like it made sense to have everyone wait around for 6 minutes, sing, and then wait around for 4 minutes. So we did that as just a drop in, just cue up and just drop in. So you'll see this footage of several musicians playing and then a handful of people standing around going, what do we do? I don't know. And then suddenly they're singing and then they're not singing. Anyway, without further ado, just a glimpse of my week ahead and of what hopefully on April 20th will be a lovely thing for all of you all to watch. Okay, so that's just a hint of where this is going, and there's a lot more to it than that. Let's see, just to remind everybody, tune in April 20th for the premiere. We would all love to see you there. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can see you all and also open up the chat window. Sorry that I've had to ignore that while doing this, but thanks for your patience. Let me open up the chat so I see folks' comments. Good. Okay, so does anybody have any thoughts or questions about what you've experienced in all of my nonstop rambling? Feel free to open up a mic or add in a chat. This is exactly like all of my classes, just so we understand. I'd be kind of curious as to, yeah, jump in.
I think it was really cool to see the uncut versions of a couple of things where you show all the camera angles. I think it was a good perspective of like what you're working with.
I appreciate that, Joel. And Joel also knows a little bit because for part of the Wish You Were Here tracking, he was one of the camera operators. So once he was done playing, I was like, okay, are you done? Here, take this camera. And so I think, Joel, from your perspective, I'd be kind of curious to know what you're looking for when you're operating a camera, especially knowing the music and knowing the other musicians.
It's basically like what you said, making sure that you're getting footage of the important things that are happening. Like if somebody is playing an awesome keyboard solo and nobody's filming it, that's kind of, you've failed at that point. So like you said, made it a little bit easier because I knew the form and I knew what was happening, to be in the right positions. But like before we would do shots, we did a lot of strategizing about who was going to cover what and making sure that we didn't miss anything.
Yeah, exactly. I think that Jude, who's the other camera operator, has done camera operating for almost all the webcasts that I've done and for the Pink Floyd and King Crimson. So, and he's my friend Greg, our bass player's son. So he's your age. And he is majoring in visual and photography and videography stuff. So I think he's really developed a really good sense of what looks good in a frame. But he doesn't necessarily know the music as well. So oftentimes, if there's stuff where it's particularly important to get shot X, Y, and Z, I'm the camera operator for that because I know who I want to grab and where I'm going to need to get them. And for Jude, it's like, okay, make sure that you get something that looks good. I don't know what you're going to shoot, but make it look good. And it generally does look good. But the problem can be for the third camera operator, I need the third camera operator to get all of the musical important bits that I'm not getting because I'm cued for somebody else. And in some of this stuff, there's quick interaction between the players. And so you want to make sure that I'm on one guitar player and they're about to duel out a little guitar solo. So Joel, can you be at the other guitar player at this moment? And that's when the strategizing would happen, would make a little plan, which is all well and good until they're like 13 minutes long takes. How do you remember where you're supposed to be by minute 3, much less minute 13? So I think in Joel's case, knowing the music really well really helps that. But it's not something I could explain to Jude. Okay, on the third chorus, make sure you're X, Y, or Z. It's not going to happen. So it's more like thinking about what their skill set is, what their awarenesses are, and then making sure that they're directed to grab those things that will lend themselves to that. So I mean, that's me rambling a little bit about that, but I think that's part of the challenge for anybody that's shooting, as well as for the folks that are performing. And I know for the other folks in the ensembles that have been subject to this, when that camera comes around, does it affect you as players?
Not as a player, but as trying not to look at the damn thing.
Hollywood rule number 1, the camera isn't there. But that's great. So you don't feel like it was distracting, Leo, whereas I saw some of the other ensemble folks nodding their head, yes, it's distracting.
I didn't even notice it. Like when we were filming, what was it? Something on Dark Side. Like I was just doing my thing and everything was just black around me. I had no idea there was a camera. I couldn't see you guys. It's kind of cool.
Well, so and that's good. I think if we are not right on top of you, those folks that were behind COVID screens, we could get much closer. Those folks that were maybe less screened off, we did not get so close to. And once there's a little bit of distancing in that dark room with not a lot of light, I think people do fade into the background. Some of what people have commented on is that the camera operators are in the shadow until suddenly they're right on top of you. You don't see them coming. And that can be what throws people off too. I think one of the voiceover bits that I used was of Jude having an exchange with Alex about whether, he freaked Alex out by sort of jumping into oh my God, there's this guy with a camera. Like, he's like, oh, I didn't mean to see you. I didn't mean that. But if I move over here, I just disappear, says Jude. I was like, ooh, I just disappear. I'm going to use that as part of the chattering stuff in the background. But it was really a response to a musician being a little bit uncomfortable with the sudden appearance of cameras. So, I'm glad, Sam, that for you, you were just performing in this black hole void and had no idea. That's probably good. Yeah, okay. And Joel's pointing out that you kind of get used to it after a while. You get used to the presence of the cameras. And I think for doing Wish You Were Here, everybody had been through the first round. And even the folks that were in King Crimson that had been in Pink Floyd knew what to expect when they walked in the room and knew that there would be kind of this distraction. Also knowing that you're going to perform half of the music, that there's always going to be a bunch of stuff missing. The people that benefit most, Sam, in your case, you got to overdub kind of last in line. for Dark Side, whereas in Wish You Were Here, you had to play with the second round of overdubs collectively and had to do much more of that. Okay, I'm going to wait. My sax solo isn't another 8 or 9 minutes, so I'm just standing here, but that's what I'm going to do. And then suddenly there's a sax player. I think that getting to do vocals or doing a sax solo at the end of the process is much closer to feeling like you're completely immersed in the music. But I know a lot of the guitar players are taking these big solos that are supposed to have 3 other guitars and a big organ part and all the sound behind them, and it's not there. It's bass, drums, and maybe one of those other elements there. So you have to do a little bit of imagining what's about to happen. Whereas if we were making an album, we would save all of those moments until the bulk of the sound was in there, and then each person one at a time would get to make their contributions. But I think that ends up being a little dull, and making a more collective group performance is more interesting. And this is interesting for Matt's comment on Great Gig, that that's one of those things where he starts that piece totally by himself. And so in the whole world of things, there's Matt and there's this damned camera, and it's right there near him. And a hyper awareness of, we're about to do this big thing. It's basically live, and all eyes and ears are on me, and I just want to play, but I can't forget that there's a camera right next to my head. So I think that part of, for those of you who are not in this ensemble or have this experience, it's really challenging to know how to tune out the stuff that you don't need to be aware of, and to maintain a focus on the stuff that you do need to be aware of. And I'm not really quite sure how they do it, because I don't think I'd be very good at it. I'm too much of a control freak, too much of a director to not want to know where all of the cameras are, and to kind of imagine, well, what kind of shot are they getting? Are they getting my good side? Did they get my guitar solo? You know, did they get the cool reflection on my, all that stuff? I can't quite let it go. But that becomes very self-conscious on camera. I think the students that have been in these ensembles have done an amazing job of losing that sense of self-consciousness and just playing. I'd be curious, Matt, you felt like the pressure of that camera at the beginning, how quickly were you able to let go of that pressure or that awareness, or were you able to?
The pressure was there until I kind of zoned out and like took a deep breath. And then after that, like, I kind of did like a 1, 2, 3 go, and then after go, you kind of just, you don't think about it anymore, and you just go. So that's kind of my mental trick for that. Okay,
that's good. That's very good. And I don't know, Cam, if you happen to be on this Zoom or not, but or any of the vocalists, Caitlin or Mia, if you all happen to be here, because during that take, I was the camera operator, and I was right on top of those screens to make sure I got close-ups of the faces. It seemed really important to get these great vocalists in a nice close-up shot, but I was really worried about being distracting. Like, they're trying to give this great emotive performance, and there I am. And first of all, it's camera. Secondly, it's the teacher who's now breathing down your neck. So it's I think there's layers of pressure involved in that I wish I could remove, but can't. At the same time, I also wonder to some degree, and anybody in the ensembles that wants to chime in can, I think in some ways knowing that the cameras are there makes it feel like it's like you're on, like it's on stage. It's a performance. You don't treat it quite so casually as a quick overdub in your bedroom or whatever, or the way we do these sound traps. I mean, I think that knowing the camera is capturing what you do visually, I would think heightens that sense of performance. I could be wrong, but that's my sense. Anybody want to weigh in on that? 100% says Matt. Yeah, okay. Anybody? Yeah, I see some other heads nodding. Good. And I'm not sure if we've lost. Maybe it's just us now. No. Good. I see folks. Great. Yeah. So does anybody have thoughts or questions for anybody about some of the stuff, or me or whomever?
I have one kind of a question.
Yeah, please, Corinne.
It's nothing crazy. I'm just curious as to how you found the people that did the videos.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, no, that's a great question. So Grace, who does our audio, is an SRT student that was around, I want to say 8 years ago, and she was one of the supervisors. She's one of the folks that was entrusted with the keys to the place. But Grace made her mark as a live engineer. She won a Boston Music Award for live sound 2 years ago, and moved to New York just before the pandemic struck. So, but she'd always been on my radar as somebody who was really good at live sound. And the aviary tapings are kind of an odd hybrid because we have to do so much so quickly that rather than approach it like a studio session, she approaches it like it's a gig. So the sound check, the drum sound, anybody that's witnessed her do this, it's like she throws the mics up on the drum kit and says, okay, play. And then 5 minutes later, the drum sound is done. And I dare all of you SRT majors to do it that quickly. Is it the most pristine studio-centric drum sound? No. But is it 98% there? Yeah, it is. And because she can do it in 5-10 minutes, we can then actually do these things. I think if it were a studio approach, we just don't have the time for that. So Grace is a phenomenon, and I don't think any of this would really be happening without her. Jeremy is another SRT student that was around the same time as Grace, and they'd done a lot of work together. So I had them both in mind. They kept recommending each other anyway. But I contacted Jeremy because he also runs an event company and has all the gear. And when the pandemic struck, I thought, okay, the live industry is screwed for a long time, and wondered maybe he needed to offload. Maybe he just should I buy some gear off him just to help him pay his rent? To what degree is this, and so we sort of struck up a deal where there was some gear that he had, some gear friends of his had that they were happy to sell me cheap. And then there were other gear that I would just rent from him as need be. And he agreed to come help me set it up. And then once I got him in the place and helped me to set it up and explained what we were doing, he just sort of said, okay, cool, I can come and set up lights for that and help Grace run audio cable. And Jeremy's operated camera sometimes. It's just sort of like he's become part of the team as well, though he's not always present. But they're both SRT students. And then, as I mentioned, Jude, our camera operator, is the son of the Birdsong Morning bass player, who also is really interested in doing camera work. So he had been doing these webcast stuff because I need free hands that will come and do stuff. And he'll do a good job, I guess. And but I think he got really intrigued. He loves music, and he was as much intrigued by what was happening in the Pink Floyd ensemble, just musically, that he was like, yeah, sign me up for Crimson for the next Floyd. I want to do them all, because I think for him, he gets to really enjoy the musical interaction, even if his role is as camera operator. I think that's the crew. Otherwise, it's sort of a all hands on deck. Darlene came in and subbed out because Jeremy had a gig this past weekend, so couldn't do a lot of it. So she shot 2 days worth of the video. Because she's been through part of so many of these live from the aviaries as camera operator and sometimes as a performer, she understands the deal, technically what's going on. And she did, knowing that she was going to have to shoot, she listened to the Pink Floyd album a few times just to get acquainted with it. And she knew the music, but really to get reacquainted with it. And sort of like what Joel and I were talking about, it was more possible for me to say, so Darlene, make sure you get so-and-so during that second part of the last bridge, because that's an important transition point. This is a thing that's very rare. The cinematographer that shot the Birdsong at Morning videos, I approached totally at random, and he liked the music. So he got back to me and said, yeah, I want to do it. He, I find, has a really natural affinity for what is interesting in what a musician is playing. Now, he doesn't just do music videos, he does lots of video work, but I think he has a really good sense of pace. The camera moves sort of at the right tempo of the music, and I feel like that's a cinematographer who's very attuned to music, and not all of them are. So that was a real unexpected bonus of getting to work with him. I feel like the crew that does these aviary things and the tapings, they all come from a musical perspective. So understanding the importance of those interactions, understanding how important a musician's sound is to them to try to capture it accurately, that's a big part of this. I feel like when we're all together, it's one giant band. Other than me getting in the way, probably. Anybody else have thoughts or questions? Okay. Well, let's see. Hopefully, you all got Jonathan's link somewhere in there. There it is at the very beginning of the chat. Make sure you've grabbed that to get your thing. And I'm seeing the quotes that I missed before. So awesome. Yes. Do if you can, check us out on April 20th. We will do one of our Zoom premieres for Pink Floyd, and then it'll go live to the rest of the world the following hour. And I think that's basically it. I really appreciate everybody tuning in. This is the last of the Headphone series for this year, and I'm sorry I did one last week too with Alex. But you all are sick of me. I'm sick of me. So why don't we sign off? I hope you all are well. Hope you all get vaccinated, and I hope we see you all on April 20th. So thanks, everybody.
Bye,
Thanks,
Alan.
Alan.
Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Oh, thank you. Great to see all these folks.
Love you. Thank you.
Oh, so sweet.
Yes, I'm glad I made it. It was awesome.
Ah, there we go. See, I'm not going to actually turn off. I'm just letting for people to come on and say thank you. That's great, though. Thanks, Bryn.
Love you too, babe.
Oh, thanks, Mom. That's my mom.
I'm really hoping that when we're back in person, there will be more Birdsong concerts.
Yeah, Brendan, we've been able to rehearse in 113 the last 2 weeks, which has been amazing. We ran through the entire "Wish You Were Here" album, start to finish, twice now. And we have to be socially distanced in big ways, and everyone's wearing masks, including the singers, which is no fun. But it's amazing.
Lying behind those things.
Yeah, I mean, you know how it would be, right? It's just awful. But they're willing to do it because we get to be in the room making the music at the same time. So I spend all day in there teaching and setting it up, but it's worth it because, yeah, just to be able to make music with other musicians is a fantastic, fantastic thing. So
One of these days.
yeah, one of these days, and it's coming soon. Coming soon.
Thank you. It was wonderful.
Thank you. Thanks, Brent. Good night.
Alan, just curious. I know you said that your cover of the Logical song isn't on YouTube, but is it streaming anywhere else? I was just curious. I really like the cover. I love Supertramp.
Oh, thanks. If you can fake your way into pretending you're in Europe or Asia, then you can see it. It's totally legal. In fact, it's really legal here too, but Universal's giving me they're not being nice. I think it's partly because the two writers from Supertramp are at war with each other, so they haven't agreed on how to deal with streaming.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, I mean, the worst thing I could tell you is if you buy the Blu-ray, then you can see the video there. But, if you're really interested, I can put it up on a private link somewhere and get it to you that way.
Oh, God. Well, I mean, I wouldn't want to make extra work for you.
Tell you what. Email me after April 20th.
All right.
when I'm done with Wish You Were Here, then I'll be able to do something like that.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for presenting.
Of course, thank you.
I love seeing behind the scenes, so it was great.
Oh, great.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Night.
Thanks, you too. Good night.
Okay. Good night.
Everyone. Okay. All right. I'm truly signing off now. Thanks, everybody. It's really great to see you.